the man who owned the building. The morning light spilled through the glass facade of the corporate tower, turning the polished marble floor into something like a mirror. People hurried across the lobby the way they always did, none of them guessing they were about to witness something none of them would forget. Near the center of the lobby stood a tired-looking man in worn work clothes, a scuffed backpack in one hand, a lunchbox in the other. Moments later, the company's young CEO strode toward him, jaw set, eyes cold. Without a word of explanation, she handed him a termination letter in front of everyone. The room went silent. People expected him to plead, to argue, to fall apart. Instead, he smiled, calm, unshaken, and said quietly, "Before anyone celebrates, you might want to check who owns this building." The words landed like a held breath. If stories like this move you, consider following along. It helps more people find them. For a moment, no one moved. Then the man folded the letter, slid it into his pocket, and waited. His name was Everett Hale, a widower raising his 10-year-old daughter, Nora, on his own. Almost no one at the company knew his story. To them, he was just the maintenance man, the guy who fixed the flickering lights, patched the leaking pipes, and greeted everyone with the same easy smile. What they didn't know was that every evening, the moment his shift ended, he crossed town to pick Nora up before her after-school program closed its doors. Life had been hard since his wife died 3 years earlier after a long illness. The medical bills had taken almost everything. He'd sold off nearly all they owned, keeping only the small house that still held their memories. He never complained. Every morning before sunrise, he made breakfast, did his best with Nora's hair, packed her lunch, and reminded her that kindness mattered more than achievement. Then he put on the same faded uniform and went to work, earning quiet respect from the guards and janitors and front desk staff who saw how hard he worked. The executives upstairs never learned his name. The company's new CEO, Vanessa Whitmore, had taken over recently after her father stepped down. She was sharp, driven, and convinced that sentiment had no place in leadership. Within weeks of taking charge, she'd launched a wave of aggressive cost-cutting, and every email from her office made the staff brace for another round of layoffs. One morning, touring the building with a group of executives, she spotted Everett resting for a moment after hauling equipment up several flights of stairs. She didn't ask what he'd been doing or how long he'd worked that morning. She simply decided he was slacking off and said so, loudly, in front of dozens of employees and visitors, declaring that her company had no room for people without discipline. She told HR to let him go on the spot. No one spoke up for him. Fear kept every mouth shut. Everett took the letter without anger, without a flicker of shame, just the quiet steadiness of someone who knew something the room didn't. Before he turned to leave, he suggested, gently, that she might want to look into who actually held the deed to the building. Confused murmurs rippled through the lobby. Vanessa laughed it off, certain it was a last, desperate bluff. But one of the company's senior legal advisors, standing nearby, went pale. He pulled up the property records on his tablet. His hands started to shake. The building didn't belong to the corporation at all. It belonged to Hale Property Holdings, and the name on every filing was Everett Hale. The silence that followed was suffocating. Years before, Everett and his late wife had built a construction company together, investing carefully instead of living large, and one of their better decisions had been buying commercial property, including the very tower Vanessa's company now leased. After she died, his drive to keep expanding died with her. He stepped back, handed the businesses to professional managers, and went looking for something simpler. More time with Nora and a chance to understand, from the inside, how his own employees were actually treated. He took a maintenance job in one of his own buildings and told no one who he was. He wanted to see whether decency survived contact with money, and to prove, at least to himself, that it could. Vanessa stood frozen, unable to fully take it in. She'd spent weeks giving speeches about leadership without ever learning a single story of the people working beneath her. Everett didn't gloat. He didn't say another word about it. He simply wished the room a peaceful day and walked out to go pick up his daughter from school. That quiet exit stung more than any shouting match could have. By evening, the story had traveled through every floor of the company. Employees who'd stood by in silence kept replaying the moment, ashamed they hadn't said anything while an innocent man was humiliated. They remembered all the times he'd carried heavy boxes without being asked, fixed a broken chair without complaint, or quietly bought coffee for someone having a rough day. Vanessa didn't sleep that night. For the first time since taking the role, she found herself questioning whether leadership built on fear could ever earn real respect. The next afternoon, she asked to meet with him. He showed up in the same work clothes, no suit, no performance. She'd braced for confrontation. What she got was kindness. Everett told her ownership had never mattered much to him. Titles came and went. Money came and went. What actually defined leadership, he said, showed up in the small moments, especially in how someone with power treated people who had nothing to offer them in return. He'd hidden his identity, he admitted, because he wanted to know whether people would be judged by their character or by their job title. Every word hit harder than any complaint could have. Vanessa realized she'd inherited a remarkable company and forgotten the one lesson her father had always tried to teach her, that everyone carries a battle you can't see. The next morning, instead of another round of firings, Vanessa called the entire staff into the same lobby where Everett had been let go. Standing in front of hundreds of employees, she apologized, not because he happened to own the building, but because she'd failed as a leader. She admitted she'd judged a man without knowing a thing about his life, and she thanked him for the lesson in humility. The applause went on for minutes. More than a few people were wiping their eyes. Everett accepted the apology graciously and asked for exactly one thing in return. Not a promotion, not a corner office, but a company-wide support program for single parents and anyone caring for a sick family member. No one, he said, should have to choose between a paycheck and the people they love. Vanessa approved it that same day. Within months, the company had rolled out flexible scheduling, childcare assistance, emergency family leave, and a scholarship fund for employees' kids. Productivity climbed. So did loyalty. People stopped showing up just for the paycheck. They showed up because they finally felt seen. Nora started stopping by the office after school. Instead of employees rushing past each other with their heads down, she found people who actually smiled at one another. Watching her father fix a hallway light one afternoon, she asked why he still bothered, since he owned the whole building anyway. He smiled and told her dignity was never about the size of a paycheck. Honest work reminded him of who he really was, and every fixed light, every repaired door, every small kindness mattered, because people mattered. Years later, employees would still talk about that day, not as the day a CEO fired the wrong man, but as the day the company finally understood that compassion was worth more than any policy on the books. Sometimes the richest person in the room isn't the one with the biggest office. It's the one with the biggest heart.